At night, a man armed with a shotgun and a canister of fuel was killed at Mar-a-Lago. He was stopped, ordered to drop his weapon, but according to the deputy sheriff, instead he raised the shotgun into a firing position and was killed. Go check it now, although it's possible the sheriff had a body camera, so maybe we'll find out what happened. Why does this keep happening over and over again? The atmosphere of hatred toward Trump has heated up to such a degree. Getting rid of him, according to the press, is so necessary that unstable minds get fixated on doing something heroic, in the name of humanity. But besides creating this atmosphere, the Democrats are also trying to find ways to physically eliminate Trump. We'll talk about that, and then about what seems to be Bill Gates' escape from the U.S., and of course about the arrival of Russian ships in the Strait of Hormuz, they call it the Hormuz Strait, and the creating the conditions for, in fact, a world war. Let's start with Biden and his criminal associates. If what I'm about to tell you doesn't lead to the trial of the century, then nothing will. For years, we were told that the raid on Mar-a-Lago was organized by the FBI, but then it turned out the FBI was against it. Then we were told that the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, he even made a statement about it himself, personally ordered it, and that the White House didn't even know about it. Well, they just had no idea at all. Let me remind you, the order stated that in case of resistance, they should open fire to kill. Who in Trump's residence? What kind of resistance could there be to justify opening fire to kill? Who could possibly resist there? The Secret Service, yes, that's the only thing you can imagine. The former president's security, which is for life, couldn't allow armed people into his personal residence, and the agents had orders that if there was resistance, they should open fire to kill. Where, you might ask, well, where are they conducting the search? Barron Trump's room, Melania Trump's bedroom. That day, Trump wasn't there, and he wasn't at Mar-a-Lago. But according to rumors, he was supposed to return, but he was delayed in New York. The FBI even claimed that they went quickly, at night, to seize the materials because an informant told them that Trump was flying in to hide the boxes with documents. In fact, this is complete nonsense, because the president has the right to disclose and declassify any documents and any information. But the FBI tried to create such a believable intrigue, the FBI when the Democrats were in power under Comey. So their goal was to justify this raid in the eyes of the public. That was their task. But the White House always emphasized that they had nothing to do with it, knew nothing about it, and if they had known, they would have supposedly stopped it. Are they lying to us?
The intention here was for the situation involving the use of deadly force to kill Donald Trump. That's what I truly believe with all my heart. You've heard for years that Attorney General Merrick Garland approved this. The White House didn't know anything about it. Everyone knew that was nonsense. Everyone knew it was fake. But could you prove it? Well, now we can.
Let's look together at how we can be sure that the White House not only knew about it, but also organized this completely unclear action, which becomes crystal clear if the goal was to accidentally kill Trump.
A new FBI memo confirms that the raid on Mar-a-Lago in 2022 was personally sanctioned by Biden. The Biden White House was involved, and they insisted on carrying out the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Even though the FBI and the Department of Justice said, we shouldn't do this, it will backfire on us. And of course, that's exactly what happened.
The FBI found a document ordering them to break into Trump's estate, regardless of possible resistance from the Secret Service, and to use deadly force. Well, if there was resistance, of course, there would have been resistance. It all came from the White House, right from the snake pit itself, from the very center of the conspiracy against us.
A new memo from the Federal Bureau of Investigation confirms that President Biden was directly involved in the FBI raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago. The event depends on timing, on Biden's brief decision, coordination between the White House counsel and the Department of Justice, in turn, Evan Kukran's position on withdrawing the privilege claim and whether he will seek a court injunction to prevent the process, the memo says. This means that the White House and White House lawyers had direct access to these files. They knew what would happen and approved searching their opponent's house. The memo stated that then-Deputy White House counsel Jonathan Shu spoke with the FBI, the Justice Department, and the National Archives in early April. These conversations took place. The voluntary return of the boxes, a reminder that, of course, they were searching Donald Trump's house to obtain documents related to Russiagate.
You understand that this is not just being caught in a lie, it's not even a scandal. It's the beginning of a criminal investigation right at the heart of the Democratic Party leadership. Moreover, knowing that Biden was a speechless puppet, well, maybe sometimes a speaking puppet, it seems the thread leads to the first African-American president, a secret Muslim, a hater of capitalist society and an enemy of the USA, Barack Hussein Obama, well, His Most Illustrious Highness or Majesty.
These are the documents that clearly show that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were involved and, more importantly, were leading Russiagate.
Breaking news today, Fox News exclusive. We have new information that appears to directly contradict the Biden administration's claims that it has nothing to do with the Justice Department's investigations into the alleged storage of classified documents by former President Trump and the subsequent search of his Mar-a-Lago residence. Correspondent David Spunt will share details tonight. Good evening.
David, Brad, good evening to you. These emails obtained by Fox News paint a different picture of the relationship between the Biden White House and the Biden Justice Department. At that time, at least publicly, these two agencies made it clear that they were not connected and stayed away from any political interference. However, new emails obtained by Fox News from May 2022, 3 months before the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago, show coordination between the White House counsel's office and the Justice Department regarding the questioning of Walt Nauta. Let me remind you, Walt Nauta is the current assistant to President Trump in the White House, who at that time was the assistant to former President Trump in Florida. Later, Nauta was charged along with Trump by special counsel Jack Smith. A May 10, 2022 email says coordination is ongoing with the Department of Justice and White House counsel to start approval and interview current staff member Walt Nauta. This event depends on timing, a prompt decision by President Biden, and coordination between the White House counsel and the Department of Justice, as well as Evan Corcoran's position on waiving the privilege claim and whether he will seek a court order to deny access. This was written by an FBI agent, and Evan Corcoran, of course, was one of Trump's attorneys at the time. This August, Brad, it will be 4 years since the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago. A few days later, then Attorney General Merrick Garland said,
I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
He may have personally approved it, but only up to that point. He got a call from the White House, saluted, and rushed to do what he swore he'd never do, namely, obey not the law, but the politicians who lead our country. He sent armed men early in the morning to the leader's residence, and there, in the confusion, it won't be clear at all who started shooting. I'm sure that among those who arrived, there were a couple of people with a very specific task: to kill the president, to kill the one with the yellow hair, to kill the one who, if he comes to power, will put us all in prison and take away our property. To kill him, the bastard, yes, if we're lucky and he happens to be there.
That was still the main goal of that raid. Here's what happened next in the morning.
I'm not sure if the Department of Justice will use this. But here's the thing. Why was there a search in Mar-a-Lago? What led to that search? What led to the appointment of that special prosecutor? What the heck were they doing in Mar-a-Lago? What were they looking for? It was an unprecedented case in the history of the United States when the Department of Justice conducted a search at the home of a former president. Well, look, it's great that we're looking at the past, and it's important to understand it. But that raid on Mar-a-Lago was very recent. It was an attempt. Whatever they were looking for, whatever scheme they came up with, they obviously found nothing, but it was an attempt to prevent President Trump from being reelected. That's all.
That's already a done deal. Yeah, well, you probably already knew that, but what does it mean that they're talking about it, discussing it, and publishing documents? What does it mean? I don't know now, man. I won't get my hopes up too much, but if they really wanted to press charges on some of these cases, and I hear that's coming, well, we'll see.
As you can see, Benny, just like you and me, is waiting for the trials to begin for those we've already caught red-handed.
I like press releases, I like headlines, but I like arrests even more, right? And real handcuffs.
Let's have a little fun after this serious news. Let's have some fun. You might ask, about what? We'll have fun with Bill Gates, I promise. By the way, the movie Kill Bill isn't about Bill Gates. It's, well, you know, sometimes when you find out what he did, you feel like grabbing a samurai sword.
And especially that video with Bill Gates, who for many years deceived the public about the relationship he had with Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates shrugs his shoulders, raises his hands, and says, "It was just dinners." In this video, and then he maniacally giggles about the agonizing, torturous death of Jeffrey Epstein, where he had several broken bones in his neck and so on. I'm not saying that Epstein didn't deserve worse, he did, but what I'm saying is that giggling and maniacally laughing about it in the middle of an interview is pretty grim. You know, I said that I regretted those dinners, and there's nothing...
Absolutely nothing new about that.
Is there any lesson here for you, for anyone else who's watching this closely? Well,
He's gone now, so, you know, in general, you always have to be very careful. Yeah.
he's dead, so overall you always have to be very careful. Look at him, look at the full picture. Bill Gates never smiles. Look at Bill Gates' wide smile. Who says he's dead? You have to be careful.
When Bill smiles, something unnatural is happening. He's like a living dead man, some kind of mummy. Everything seems to be in place. The gray hair, a friendly face. But when he's happy, he starts to look like, I know, like a vampire.
Epstein's documents show that Bill Gates, of course, was an incredibly close business partner of Jeffrey Epstein, who was also involved in, well, side activities, if you know what I mean.
Jeffrey tirelessly searched for young girls for Bill across the vast expanses of Russia. Some naturally were trained by the FSB, while others were just underage prostitutes with STDs.
Considering the huge number of Russian and Eastern European prostitutes that Jeffrey Epstein supplied to him, and then he tried to get special medicines to secretly give them to Melinda Gates. This was one of the first huge, disgusting, nauseating revelations from Epstein's documents. But we already knew about this anyway. Why does it sound so believable? You know, what's not true really sounds kind of empty, but what's true rings like a bell. Well, because for years, as you can see, this article was written in 2023. For years, we've heard about how Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed Bill Gates by exposing his affair with a young Russian bridge player who was at least 30 years younger than Bill Gates. And if you're going to have an affair and do it behind your wife's back, well then, you know, why can't this letter be true? We already know Bill Gates is one of the biggest scumbags in the world, and even his wife explicitly says, you know, maybe it's time to investigate Gates.
Every time these details come up, it brings back memories of very, very painful times in my marriage, but I've already put that behind me.
That was Bill Gates' ex-wife, and according to her, he is a vile person and former husband. After Prince Harry's arrest, Bill Gates suddenly started announcing that he would not participate in plenums, conventions, and other events covered by the press. I don't like, so to speak, listening to rumors, especially since we live in the age of AI. But I don't know if I have any sympathy for the person named Bill Gates. Maybe it's because of the rumors about how he stole Steve Jobs' idea, or about how he vaccinated continents with terrible consequences. Or maybe it's because of the rumors about his games with Russian teenagers who were brought to him in numbers comparable to those in which they were brought to the British prince. By the way, they were later moved, meaning from place to place, transferred from Bill to Andrew, from Andrew to Bill, and then to someone else. Or maybe there was an exclusivity agreement. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not even interested. I hope Bill gets arrested because he belongs in the same prison where his friend and supplier Jeffrey Epstein was held.
Well, he died, so, you always have to be very careful.
On that note, to not die, you have to be careful. Ha 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 ha. We'll finish with Bill, who isn't Kill Bill, but who knows, maybe he'll end up in the same cell and someone will decide to kill Bill. And now to the main international event of the day.
Russian ships in the Gulf of Oman, Moscow and Tehran are creating a powerful naval barrier, challenging the United States carrier groups at a moment of extreme tension. Right now, the naval forces of the two countries are conducting large-scale maneuvers in the strategically important waters of the Indian Ocean, which is a direct response to threats from Washington. As the American aircraft carriers Abraham Lincoln and Gerald Ford prepare for a possible strike on Iran, the arrival of the Russian fleet in these waters fundamentally changes the rules of the game. Moscow is effectively taking on the role of guarantor of regional stability, demonstrating that any attempt at a forceful regime change in Tehran will face unpredictable consequences. At sea. Analysis shows this is more than a routine exercise. It's a deliberate political gesture.
Wow, Russia is playing with the threat of World War III. By conducting joint maneuvers in the Osman Strait on February 19th, Russia has declared that it will help Iran block the Osman Strait, or Bay, I'm not sure what it's called in Russian, in the northern part of the Indian Ocean. We're talking about the corvette Stoiky and the frigate Marshal Shaposhnikov. There are two ships there. I don't know, maybe more are on the way, but at least for now, we're talking about two ships. In some reports about the exercise, Chinese ships are also mentioned, one destroyer and one frigate, but it's still unclear whether they're there or just plan to be there. Iran needs joint exercises to show that they are not alone, that they have military partners supporting them. And for the U.S., this means they have to consider the risk of attacks on tankers, as well as missile and drone attacks on the bases of allies like Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Emirates, and so on. And potentially, accordingly, the involvement of Russia and China in a war for Iran, which unfortunately means exactly what it sounds like.
The presence of Russian frigates equipped with modern missile systems turns the Gulf of Oman into a zone where the United States can no longer act with impunity. If Washington still decides to launch a massive, weeks-long operation, the risk of a direct confrontation with the Russian fleet will increase many times over, forcing the Pentagon to urgently reconsider its plans. Moscow is building a line of defense in the ocean, protecting its strategic interests through active support of its ally. In the event of an attempt to blockade Iranian ports by sea, the joint group is ready to switch to convoy escort and patrols, which could completely block the most important trade routes. This naval gambit confirms that the crisis has finally escalated into a global confrontation between superpowers, where every movement of a warship could become a pretext for the start of a major war.
How is the United States responding to this? After all, what we have been trying so hard to avoid is becoming possible. The world is turning from a global trading network into a global battlefield.
Here is footage of American tanker planes in motion, according to military experts as published on social network X. This is the largest deployment of American tanker planes since World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, this is happening before our eyes. We're heading to war with Iran.
Yes. Despite the involvement of Russia and China, or maybe exactly because Russia and China have intervened, it looks like we are starting a war. Here is the position of MAGA, Make America Great Again, on this issue, I think.
They're planning a war with Iran, but why overthrow the Ayatollah? Is this really that relevant to Americans? I don't think so. No one has presented any arguments that this is like America's policy. First of all, I'm not a supporter of this, but look, nobody asked me, so I'll just explain my position. The last time Trump bombed Iran, his ratings went up. People liked his actions with Maduro. Yeah, the kidnapping of Maduro. His ratings went up, like people liked it, and it kind of reset the situation. And that makes him a wartime president. And this, you could say, strengthens some special, very important interests of Israel, the interests of other countries. They might want Iran to be eliminated. Saudi Arabia is one of them. You know, it's not just Israel. Many countries in the Middle East also want Iran to be removed. The Ayatollahs too, you know, obviously the Middle East has been at war for a very long time. There are many enemies there, and maybe Trump is just finishing the job, making a deal and simply getting rid of them. But the cards don't lie. All right, it's happening. It's happening where the tankers are. That's where the fighter jets are too. That's absolutely right.
Most Republicans really don't like this idea, so why does Trump like it?
We're watching Iran. We have a lot of ships. We're keeping an eye on Iran. We have a lot of ships going there. We have a lot of ships moving in that direction. A huge fleet is being sent there just in case. We hope we won't have to use it. Let's see. Well, here we are. Gentlemen, take your positions at the monitors where the planes and tankers are moving. You know, that's exactly what they did. By the way, before Operation Midnight Hammer, they moved several tankers as a diversion. Then, well, you know, they dropped those Moab bombs right on the Iranian nuclear facilities. That's the situation. What do you think? Do you believe we should start a war with Iran? I certainly don't. That's not what I voted for. Nobody did. And, you know, the pothole in front of my house is much more dangerous to me than the Ayatollah in Iran, as far as I understand.
I want you to understand that Benny Johnson is one of the loudest voices in MAGA. When he comes to the White House, they roll out the red carpet for him.
I don't like it. I don't want any more wars. I've been against this from the very beginning. Call me a panic monger. Call me whatever you want. But, you know, a war with Iran is definitely not what we voted for, and it's certainly not what I think the 77 million MAGA supporters voted for. Nevertheless, I'll defer to Tucker on this. Yeah, Tucker just was in Israel, and he commented on, well, Iran. In his interview with Mike, Huckabee and his view on this is obvious, just like Tucker's view on these things. It's a kind of instinctive gut feeling that I always respect. Let's go.
I want to ask you a question. Well, how important is it what Americans think?
Well, the opinion of Americans is very important. That's why they vote. That's why they have freedom of speech. We want it to be that way.
So, what percentage of Americans support a war with Iran? Yes, I think it's about, not sure. I saw the numbers yesterday, but I think it was around 21%. Okay. Is that enough to start a war with Iran?
We don't live in a world where a poll is conducted to determine what the direction of our policy should be.
Because no, I thought you just said we're a direct democracy. No, we care about it a lot, but on the other hand, do we make decisions on foreign policy and even on domestic policy based on the latest? Do we really
care that much?
About it? Yes, in a sense, you know how. If we ignore it, then how can we truly care? Well, I think we do care when we see a threat because but as for the opinion of Americans, you see, you have 350 million Americans, they vote. They voted in the last election partly based on the promise of no more wars. All right, now we're going to have a war. It seems like 80% of people are against it, in that range, let's say 70%, but nowhere is there a majority supporting this war. And this isn't direct democracy, but it's a form of democracy. It's representative democracy.
the highest form of democracy in our republic, since we're not a pure democracy but a republic?
Yes, representative democracy.
This will give Americans the opportunity to vote if they believe we've made the wrong decisions. Personally, I believe the president is making the right decisions.
But you just said that what Americans think is very important, and if the majority is against it, then in what sense does it matter? What I hear is, it's important what they think, but actually it doesn't matter what they think, because no.
You take it in, definitely, but in the end...
What do you do with it after swallowing it?
Then make sure you have, well, you know, if you have it, it just comes out the other end, of course.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comments. I think this explains everything that will happen.
So Carson also represents a huge number of voters. Whether we like it or not, both of them have influence. And more importantly, their opinion represents the views of at least half the country. Well, and probably 3/4 of Trump's voters. If this war drags on, they won't go to vote at all. They'll just stay home. So Trump owes it both to himself and, gentlemen, to us as well to deal with Iran very quickly. Doesn't this remind you of the situation with Russia right before the attack on Ukraine? No war, no special military operation, no debt, not many casualties. The opposition forces will rise up for an overthrow, including the army, police, and armed opposition groups. But do they exist? Will the U.S. be able to do what Russia failed to do, which led to a prolonged and disastrous war for Russia? I don't know. Benny doesn't know if Trump knows either, but he hopes that what the generals told him is true and that they're not mistaken. At the very least, the situation is very, very complicated, ladies and gentlemen, and in this war or SMO, either Trump brings his successor into the White House in 2028, or we hand over the reins of power to the commie fascists again. That's the complicated story, that's all.